You've got Tim Thomerson playing Gene/Gene.
Ooh, I get so excited.
What? Go get him, Commander.
And boy, that's not a problematic character.
Yeah, I was about to say, that was one of the main things I want to talk about. Just watching it now, it's like, oh no.
Oh no.
When we were messaging each other last night, I mentioned this old series, QUARK, from the 70s
Yes.
with Richard Benjamin.
Yes.
This goes back to, this is like a while ago. Somebody commented on the Salvage One Lost Saucer for Art Space Nuts video of ours. And Sergeant Dave said, Salvage One must be a prequel to QUARK. And at the time, it didn't ring a bell to me. I said, well, wow, I don't remember that one. And I must have, I think I looked it up to see, it was another series about salvaging salvage operation in outer space. But it didn't ring a bell. But recently, I stumbled across it somewhere. I think it was on YouTube. I actually saw some footage or an image of Richard Benjamin as Adam QUARK on the show. And then it hit me. I was like, now I remember it.
My name is Adam QUARK, commander of this ship.
And so I went and watched it.
I didn't need that kind of it. When you're like, would you care to watch the first episode of QUARK? I was like going, dude, I mean, it's true. I haven't watched it in years, but QUARK, it only lasted 8 episodes.
8 episodes.
And in my mind, I mean, I can remember it.
Activate autograph.
Autograph activated.
So it was a real blast from the past watching that. And after I watched that, I watched the first episode because what you sent me was the pilot.
Oh, okay.
And then the first episode, and I did watch that going, oh, this is odd. Where's the plant guy?
We plants never feel pressure. The worst we do is wilt.
Because he's not in it. And the first episode of the series, which is a prolonged Star Wars riff, where they have the Source instead of the Force.
The Source.
And it's making dumb Star Wars jokes. That had the plant guy in it. And they had gotten rid of the doctor guy with the eye patch. He only was in the pilot. They kept the android, but it was in there going like, oh, wow, yeah, this is what I actually remember more than that pilot episode.
Yeah.
Because they reconfigured it a little bit.
It was mind-blowing to me because I do vividly remember that now watching it. I probably never saw the pilot, but I just think the setting and the characters, I remember.
I will say this about it. For those who are not familiar, this was a Buck Henry project. Buck Henry, brilliant writer, director, and just comedic star of the 70s. What really launched Buck Henry was he's the guy who adapted the novel The Graduate for film. He wrote the screenplay of The Graduate based on the novel.
Yes.
And he was kind of an undergroundy guy anyway, and that made his name. And he worked with Mel Brooks, like, closely. He was one of the guys who came up with Get Smart. This makes perfect sense. QUARK, just like Get Smart, and just like another Mel Brooks one from the 70s called When Times Were Rotten. Do you remember that one?
Hold your tongues!
No.
That was a one season. When Times Were Rotten was Mel Brooks doing a Robin Hood parody.
Guys, where's the man? Where's Robin? Pass the salt, would you please, Friar?
Long before he did Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Wow.
Yeah, it was for TV, and, same thing. He just did parodies.
And you asked the question, why is this man our leader? Alan, please.
Mel Brooks was the parody guy for so long. So Get Smart was a parody of the spy genre, and Get Smart still can crack me up. It's not all genius, but it's so good, and Buck Henry was the main writer and co-creator. When Times Are Rotten, Buck Henry wasn't involved with that, but that was right before QUARK. So Mel Brooks did his Robin Hood parody, and it didn't last very long. Then Buck Henry's like, ooh, Star Wars. So he did QUARK as a parody of Star Trek, Star Wars, Flash Gordon, all that stuff. And I will say, rewatching it, what I realize is there are jokes here and there that still land. Richard Benjamin's always great.
Yes.
The guy, and also a very talented director, but as a comedic actor, very funny. So he's good. you've got Tim Thomerson, who was big time stand-up guy at the time, playing Gene.
Gene?
Aye, sir, we've got him.
Are we on full magnoscope?
Yes, my commander.
And boy, that's not a problematic character.
Yeah, I was about to say that was one of the main things I want to talk about. Just watching it now, it's like, oh no,
oh no.
That's so many levels.
But it has an explanation. But then you're also sitting there going, they cast him because I bet in his stand-up he would do probably a Fae character, and so they're like, oh, we could use him as, and then you're like, there you go. So, and it has stock kind of set up jokes. One of the things I laughed at in that first episode, it's totally stupid, is you've got the scientist guy, the old crazy scientist with the eye patch. He goes,
a totally varied wave cycle. Do you understand what that means?
Don't you know what that means? And Richard Brenton goes,
what does it mean?
I wish I knew.
I mean, it's like that kind of dumb stuff. Yeah. And at the very end of the episode, they're like, where the android kind of saves the day. And they're like going, Andy, you're great. And what's more, the more time you spend with us, we're going to keep perfecting you. And eventually you'll be just like us. You'll be as human as we are.
What do you think of that?
And then the android goes, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Some of the setups and the jokes work, but someone in the comments, did you read any of the comments under the YouTube video? One of the comments was, I think this worked really well on paper, is what the guy said.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
And I do think that the pacing's kind of, it's not quite good. There's the laugh track. That's not them. That was every show of the 70s.
Yeah. You can even hear that, had those laughs that you hear. You recognize, I've heard that.
There's always that one coffee guy. Like it's like, like there's laughter, but in it you hear this guy going, and I'm like, I know that guy. I've heard that in every show.
And there's the high-pitched cackle. Whatever that is.
That's the thing is you can literally, that's the soundtrack of our lives, man, is because they use the same tracks for every one.
But I kept thinking, I was like, this would be so much better without the laugh track if they just get it out. Because
the budget's really low.
The timing was good enough. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it looks cheap. I mean, and that's okay if you're doing a parody sci-fi show. Yeah. But you're like, ooh.
Well, I thought that actually, I was kind of surprised at how good it did look. Yeah, it's way low budget by today's standards, but for 1970s, it looks just about as good as Star Trek did.
Well, yeah. That's true. And
they use all the Star Trek sound effects too.
They do.
Just full of nothing but.
And you're like, what? Oh, great. I will say it was well written in addition to a cool concept or a funny concept, especially that first one, which is Buck Henry wrote it. And you're like, he's not phoning it in. Like some of the stuff he's using terms and alien races and the concept of the head and all this stuff. I'm like, this is well thought out, even though it's not as hilarious as I thought it was when I was a kid. This is a show where we revisit things and go, yeah.
It's not.
Now I know why it only lasted 8 episodes.
Parts of it, I thought. I mean, the timing, like the robot, I thought was hilarious. Richard Benjamin's reactions to everything, of course, because he's always great. His timing, it's great. Him wrestling with that amoeba-like pet that he has.
Yeah, that was really funny.
Okay, come on, come and get it. Come on. Too tight, pal.
And that plasma puppet thing is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, you know what that reminded me of, and this is there's so many things that this reminds me of that came before and after, or sort of were being developing at the same or developed at the same time. No, but Dark Star.
All right, where are you?
Dark Star. You remember John Carpenter's Dark Star?
Oh yeah.
Come on, quit playing around.
Because that alien, it's not exactly the same, but it reminded me of the beach ball alien from Dark Star.
Come on.
With the claws.
Get off my back.
And I was going to say Red Dwarf, which is actually a better sci-fi parody, mainly because Red Dwarf is British, and Red Dwarf was going for, like, the Brits in general are great at surreal humor. And this, what Buck Henry created, Quark is more literally Borscht Belt joke. Set up, punchline, set up, punchline. The main problem with the Gene character, besides it being problematic, is the fact that in that first episode, you know the rhythm. So every single time that character's on screen, he'll start as the tough guy and then follow it up almost immediately with, oh. All right, so sorry, we haven't explained it. Quark was a sci-fi parody show that lasted 8 episodes in 1977. And the gimmick or the concept is done like Star Trek, where you've got the ship captain, he's doing captain notes, instead of the captain's log. And so you're like, ooh, he's a starship captain. And then you realize his starship is a garbage truck, a garbage scow. And his job, which is beneath him, but he's still, willing to do it, is collecting trash in space. With his crazy crew, and his crew is 2 twin actresses, but they're playing a woman and her clone, and they're both named Betty. And the whole gag is, and they're very cute, and it's 1970s, so they're wearing very tight Lycra outfits.
The heel on my boot is loose.
But the whole thing is, the captain, Adam Quark, likes one of them.
I'm extremely fond of Betty. If only I knew which Betty it was that I am extremely fond of.
He just doesn't know which one. Because they talk in sync.
Betty?
Yes?
Take it up 3 points.
3, Commander.
In unison, and they both accuse the other one of being the clone.
Because she's only a clone. I'm the real person. She is not. It's not true.
Easy, Betty.
Which actually is a joke that Robert Kirkman used in Invincible.
I should have never trusted the flawed calculations of a clone. Clone?
He had these 2 supervillains who are these massive mutant guys who are also scientific geniuses.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And they're always going, "You're my clone." They was like, "Nope, I'm the original. You're the clone."
Don't start. I'm the original.
Yeah. So I'm like, good, Robert Kirkman. We watched the same show when we were kids. But anyway, so Betty and Betty are the hotties. And there's also Gene. So GENE/JEAN. And there's a name for this type of human. And I think they call them, is it transmorphs?
Transmute.
Or transmute.
Our chief engineer is a transmute, Gene. Or as he or she is sometimes called, Gene.
And the idea is they have both male and female sets of hormones.
Transmutes are just like everyone else, except, of course, for the fact that they have a full set of male and female chromosomes.
So essentially it's a dumb gag. So you can have Tim Thomerson, who was, I think he may still be alive. Sorry, don't want to say he's dead. He was a big stand-up comic at the time, did Tonight Show all the time. Lots of movies. He did a lot of B-movie stuff. But the whole thing is, so he's either really tough, the manliest man, like, "I got it, Captain."
Have you finished the auto system checkout?
Checkout completed. Power load is at maximum.
Good.
And then he'll turn around and go,
"And guess what?"
What?
I've almost finished my needle point.
That's the whole thing. In one body, he's both man and woman. And there are bad jokes where you've got someone going,
Would you let your brother or sister marry one?
The guy, the sort of transmutophobic character.
Won't you tell me what happened?
Get away from me.
Doc?
Yes, the transmutophobic. I think it's just because I thought the guy was actually pretty funny and he delivered his lines well.
He was,
but there wasn't much story stuff they could do with him. He was a scientist, their onboard specialist guy who knows a lot, but is also scatterbrained, and he has an eye patch. That was a dumb joke. Like Buck Henry wrote, it's like he has an eye patch because he spent too many hours at the microscope and fell asleep. So he poked his eye. That's like, and he's the one building the robot. In the second episode where they just pretend the doctor didn't exist, the robot's still there, Andy, the android, but they say that QUARK built him.
Oh,
so they just like
funny.
write the doctor out as like, nope, that's QUARK's robot.
I'd like to say I'm sorry to Commander QUARK. He built me with his own hand.
So you got him building a robot, which is a terrible looking, literally silver box robot with like vacuum cleaner tube arms and a big fancy whirling light thing on it.
I can't believe I'm doing this. I must have my wires crossed.
And it's just always getting things wrong. Like it says,
everything is fine, thank you.
Thank you?
You're welcome.
And they're like, you're welcome.
I feel wonderful.
But that's the whole thing, and they report to the United Galactic, whatever.
As you know, I am Dr. Otto Palindol, Superintendent-in-Chief of Perma 1.
Conrad Janis, and this would have been what he did right before Mork and Mindy.
Mork and Mindy, yeah.
And he's funny. He's the officious bureaucrat, and then the head of the United Galactic, whatever, Space Patrol is literally called the Head. And he's on a visual screen, and it's just a floating head with this enormous makeup cranium. And then they do lots of terrible jokes, like, you think you have a headache?
Can you imagine a migraine the size of a supernova?
No, sir.
You're like, stop. Just stop.
This is an example. So many things this reminds me of. There's a lot of Dark Star. I had to think that Buck Henry had to have seen Dark Star, which came out about 3 years before. The humor in Dark Star is surprisingly...
it's very similar.
That's not for target practice. That's for emergencies only.
This all inspired Douglas Adams, I think. That was the main thing I kept thinking of. This reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide, because Andy...
Yeah, it has that
he's like Marvin in the BBC.
Yes. I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
You know, like you say that Andy trying to make love to that that apparatus thing that causes him to accidentally eject the garbage, which saves him.
I love you. I need you.
Reminded me a bit. It's not exactly the same, but it reminded me of the bomb. You know, the artificially intelligent bombs in Dark Star.
Hello, Bob? Are you with me? Of course.
That was very Douglas Adams.
Very.
Are you willing to entertain a few concepts? I am always receptive to suggestions. Fine.
The philosophical conversations that they have to have with the bomb to convince it to not explode.
Yeah.
Think about this then. How do you know you exist? Well, of course I exist. But how do you know you exist? It is intuitively obvious.
So Douglas Adams. But I had forgotten about Dark Star because that was a cult classic, basically. It was a student film that John Carpenter did, which was released in theaters many times
and actually
in subsequent years.
Was a success, but I mean, because it was made for nothing.
Yeah.
But it became such an underground hit. And reviewers were like, that guy had $50 and he turned out one of the most entertaining sci-fi movies in years. And that kind of launches John Carpenter. Of course, that didn't launch him, but he's then able to do things like, I'll do eventually Halloween. And we all say, thank you very much, Mr. Carpenter. One of the greatest films of all time.
The Thing, right?
I love Halloween. Oh, he eventually did The Thing. Yeah. The Thing came
from New York.
After.
Was that him?
Escape from New York. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite ones he did, which I think he hated this film because I think he did it because he felt it was like something he did so he could do something else, so he could get funding for some other film. Yeah, Diary of the Invisible Man with Chevy Chase.
Well, me and John covered it on our podcast when we got to the 1980s.
The monster. Okay, yeah. Of course.
And so it was something that I hadn't watched in a long time. I liked it in the theater. Rewatching it, there are still parts of it I do like. And both John and I decided the thing that mainly works against that movie is them rewriting it for Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase, when he's in the right project, even though he's a monster human that we all know now, thanks to everyone who's ever worked with him coming out and going, he's awful. But as a comedic actor, he had this sweet spot where he would kill me. But in that one, they're trying to make him a slightly action hero guy in it. But they still have to give him his Chevy Chase moments. And then you're like, oh, I don't know if that really is helping the movie. But they have that amazing practical set where the lab, when the thing gets set off and parts of the lab are invisible, that was a practical set, a full building, full skyscraper with these carved out pieces. And when you're looking at it, you're like going, damn. Because John Carpenter, he may not have been totally jazzed. And I did read that he was like, this was the worst working experience of my life because of Chevy. But at the same time, he put some amazing stuff in there. And it was one of the first movies where they're like going, look at what we can do now with invisible effects. Like him chewing the gum, and you're just seeing the gum in air getting chewed up and going down the esophagus. Great.
Mm-hmm. The scene that really stuck with me was when one of the scenes where he and Sam Neill's the bad guy in the movie. They have a
Sam Neill is bringing it so hard in that John and I are going, oh, you're so much better than what you've been given. I love that guy. I love him.
There's a scene where I think Chevy's character has him in a chokehold or something because they're wrestling in a hallway somewhere.
Oh,
and he says, "Do you have any idea what it's like to close your eyes?" And because he was saying he can't sleep normally because he can't. When he closes his eyes, he can still see because he sees through his own eyelids.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
it's pretty intense.
I mean, the movie has some smartness to it, and it was based on a novel. And again, I think that had they not had that lead, and I like Chevy Chase as an actor, but if they had someone where they could have taken it slightly darker, more real, or something like that, and actually turned it into desperate guy who's been turned invisible, it could have been a minor classic, is what I'm going to say. But I enjoyed rewatching Quark. I think it was destined not really to make it, but Buck Henry's sensibilities as far as parody and Mel Brooks's are so aligned. And again, talk about when they're on, best stuff in the world. I think Quark is not, but I remembered it completely from when I was a kid. They never made any toys. There was never you never had his garbage scow ship. So I think had it gone a couple of seasons, there would have been Quark toys. Mommy, get me Betty 1 and Betty 2.
Yeah, somebody mentioned something along those lines. Somebody mentioned that in a comment under the Electra Woman and Dyna Girl video. That it was a shame that they never really had any toys or there wasn't much merch apparently for that at the time.
I think they did a little, but you're absolutely right. There wasn't a lot. The Croft Super Shows technically only lasted 3 years, I think 2 or 3 years. And even though they really just set in my brain, and it's probably because they got rerun over and over and over again. Even though the studios or the networks were not going to pay them to make more, they're like, well, we own the rights, so let's just start at the beginning again. There you go. There's some more Bigfoot and Wild Boy. And the kids are going, I don't even know, I've already seen it. So I think it seemed like it lasted longer, but I do remember puzzles. You remember not chloroforms? What were they called? Color forms. You remember those? They were the static electricity little peel off. They weren't stickers because there was nothing sticky on them, but you had the little sets that were a shiny board, and you could here's an action pose. I had a Batman and Robin one. Right. You could put kapows in there. You could put a Batmobile in the background, and you could rearrange them however you liked. And I think that they had an Electra Woman and Dyna Girl of those. I don't know if there was even dolls. I did see that because I've said this before on the podcast, there are these modern companies that are highly vintage retro. including Mego, who made those 8-inch action figures like the Superman I showed you from the 70s. Mego came back because people bought the name, and then they're like, we're going to use the same molds and recreate all those dolls from back then, but we're going to do extras and different ones, and they've gotten into real niche stuff. I think they've done Electra Woman and Dyna Girl now. And so I'm like, wow. So there wasn't one in the 70s, but now if you've just got a hankering and you need to have Judy, Laurie and Judy, yeah, you can get them.
Yeah, I was trying to find stuff.
And my birthday is in March.
Okay,
that's a little hint.
A couple other things too, that getting back to QUARK just briefly, and then we'll move on to this next question.
Yeah.
And this is probably things you're not familiar with, because I know you didn't have you weren't playing computer games, text adventures and all that stuff. But
I mean, I did play Zork and Seventh Guest. Those were early. I played those at friends' houses.
Do you remember?
So
Planetfall?
I never finished them. No.
Do you remember Planetfall? That was another Infocom game, very much in this vein of sci-fi humor, where you played. You started off as a janitor on a starship, and the humor is very much like QUARK. So that there's that, and of course, I mean, Planetfall was also heavily influenced by Hitchhiker's Guide, which
Hitchhiker had its own game adaptation. And then
which was
Terry Jones, Terry Jones of Monty Python was it Starship Titanic, which was an interactive computer game with Monty Python-esque humor set in space. I think it was called Starship Titanic.
Well, there was one that was done by Steve Maretsky, who co-wrote. Well, Steve Maretsky did Planetfall. He basically did the Hitchhiker's Guide game, because Douglas wasn't really. He would lose interest in projects notoriously. Yeah, he would be there, and then he would just kind of disappear. So Steve had to finish the game. It's mostly his creation.
Oh, man, I'm totally wrong. You know what I need to do? Stop drinking. Starship Titanic was actually Douglas Adams.
Oh, okay.
So I think he came up with, this is why I thought it. The game's voice cast includes Terry Jones and John Cleese.
There you go, yeah.
And Terry Jones wrote the tie-in novel. Douglas Adams' Starship Titanic was written by Terry Jones. That's where I got that from. But it was Douglas Adams who came up with the concept, and it was Douglas Adams, Michael Bywater, and Neil Richards were the writers of it. And it came out in 98.
Yeah, Steve Maretsky did something else similar around that time, but it was a different.
Well, let's not
title.
Fight. I don't like this when we get like just
I can't remember what it's called right now. But anyway, and the other thing too, you probably don't know this. This is very, to me, it's obscure anyway, because I don't think I've ever met anybody who was familiar with this author, Harry Harrison. Does that ring a bell?
Who?
Novelist Harry Harrison.
The name's familiar, but again, I worked in a bookstore for 12 years, and I may have probably just seen it.
He was a sci-fi comedy novelist. There was a series he had called Bill the Galactic Hero, which was like
Bill the Galactic Hero.
Yeah,
I never read those, but yes, through working at the bookstore, I used to look at those and go like, "Oh, it's like fun." Never read them.
Which I had to refresh my memory. I looked up the original came out in '65, and then I think the heels of the success of Hitchhiker's Guide, I'm guessing he came out with a series of five sequel novels. He came out with in the late '80s, and I read a lot of those. And I remember the books. I just have very distinct memories of laughing out loud reading them because they're just so silly.
I remember looking at I think I didn't know that the first one came out in 65 because I think it probably has been re-released a few times, and the cover art looks very modern now. Obviously,
I didn't know that till today. When I looked it up, it's like, oh wow.
There you go.
I just remember from the 80s. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Nothing to see here.
Our longtime viewer, Manisman, and also now Patreon supporter. Thank you.
You're awesome.
He said he's seen Oppenheimer and Barbie, and he loved both of them.
I'm seeing Oppenheimer on Friday.
Oh, you are? Oh, good. Okay.
In 70 millimeter.
Yay.
Yeah.
So I love watching historical epics, and I think this is Nolan's best movie so far. Recently, I also watched a Soviet war film, Come and See, by Elem Klimov.
Yeah, that's another.
Movies.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? Okay. It's one of the greatest movies ever made, albeit being very hard to watch.
Wow.
some people say that it's the only war film that is truly anti-war. So I'm very intrigued to see this. But then he asks, on the same note, what are your favorite historical epics / war films that you've encountered over the years? I immediately thought of 1917, which is a more recent film, but I was absolutely
haven't seen
knocked
still.
out.
And I think it's on one of the streaming services, so I can check it out. I mean, it sounded good. I remember the trailer being awesome, and I was intrigued by the concept of it's basically in real time.
Real time in one long shot. At least it's
one long shot.
It's filmed to make it look like it's one continuous shot.
That's
it's incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah, and the fact that it unfolds in real time. Yeah, it's.
I read that question, and it did send me down kind of a mental rabbit hole. And historical epics, not sure if I have an answer. I do like a historical epic, but as far as war films, and his comment on it being the first true anti-war film, I would say, because I gave it some thought, I would say that pretty much any war film from the 60s on, after the John Wayne period of, the 1940s, 50s, we did it, we beat the Nazis, and so every war film is still really clean, shot on, sound stages and very ultra patriotic. Once we got past that and the Vietnam War happened, almost every war film that's come out has been walking that line of, yes, these are heroic men and heroic story, but war is horrible. So a lot of them. And I could point to Apocalypse Now all day, love it, even though, of course, it is an adaptation of Heart of Darkness more than a war film, but it's definitely a war film too. Love that one. I also, the recent All Quiet on the Western Front, the German produced one that won the Oscar or won some Oscars. I saw that on Netflix, and it's earth-shatteringly good. And I think it had something to do with a German finally did that story instead of it being all these, American filmmakers. And also the budget was really big. So it's devastating, and it's also really well shot. Mm-hmm. Saving Private Ryan, I'd say that movie really walks the fine line because it's Spielberg. So it does walk a line of like, these are patriotic, heroic men, but he also allows them to be crazy human. And you are seeing, especially the opening 20 minutes, he's not going to sugarcoat it. He's not going to sugarcoat it. This is how horrifying the Omaha Beach landing was. And you're like, good Lord. And then I'll say this, my wrap up, my favorite war film, and I think the most anti-war film of all time, and stay with me, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I mean, it is a comedy, but it is the blackest comedy of all time, where it's all about the interests of organizations and the military industrial complex, and it has none of them are factoring in humanity at all, and it comes down to these petty arguments, no fighting in the war room. It's just brilliant. It's brilliant, and it leaves you cold because it's funny, and then at the end you're like, holy shit, the world could end through something that stupid. The world could end through, I think about that all the time. It's like Donald Trump had the nuclear codes. At any point, he could have gone, you know what? Don't like those guys. Boom. It could have happened. So, yes, I think the greatest anti-war film of all time is Dr. Strangelove. And it is also in my top 10 of movies of all time. Love it. Love it.
That makes me think of, and this is not at all in the same class as Dr. Strangelove, and it's not even really a war movie, but War Games.
War Games, again, that's another thing.
I love that movie. Yeah.
I do. And actually, that one holds up. It's not about whether the tech is ancient, because, of course, you look at it going, Jesus. But it does a really good job of being like a young kid adventure, which they were doing a lot in the 80s, where it was like teens are our saviors, like Last Starfighter, which is a movie I also will always, tout. I love it. It's not a serious comment on war either. But in the 80s, there were all these movies about teenagers are smarter than you think, and they might save us. And it's another thing about how fragile world safety is when it's driven by tech that we built. And of course, the idea of AI is so hot right now. People should revisit it because the whole thing is we created a Frankenstein monster and we can't stop it. The only way is for this kid to logic his way through it and save all of our asses. So movies, also in the 80s, by the way, you can back me up on this, they were shoving nuclear panic down our throats.
Yeah.
That was the second Cold War with Russia. So I remember the day after that miniseries scared my pants off because it was a realistic, this is what would happen. This is after the nuclear bombs drop and people's skin is flaking away and stuff like that. And do you remember Special Bulletin?
Is that the one
TV
where a terrorist have a bomb and it blows up?
Yes, and they do it in real time, like you're watching news reports.
Yeah.
So it is this whole thing of like some terrorists in, I think, Boston Harbor have a suitcase nuke on a boat in Boston Harbor. And they're like going, if our demands aren't met, we're going to set it off. And it just keeps cutting back to the news crews like going, well, the negotiators are moving in and all this. And then it ends with the nukes go off and literally it's like the screen goes white.
I think it's Charleston, South Carolina is where it's set.
Oh, maybe it was South Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's another thing where you're like going, damn, they were really making sure we were afraid.
Yeah. I vividly remember that scene where the bomb blows up and you see the
around
aftermath.
The same period. We were just constantly aware. Reagan and Gorbachev, it's like one of these guys could just push that button.
And again, you have somebody reasoning with a computer using logic, which again harkens back to Dark Star in a way where it doesn't work.
Back to Star Trek.
Yeah. Oh, heavily. Yeah.
I just love the whole. Was it Nomad? That episode where Nomad is like the doomsday device, and he's basically going like, so you say, and it's just Kirk going like, but if your programming says you can't do this, and your makers are us humans or whatever it is, it's like going, can't deal with paradox, and then it just shuts down. It's awesome.
The old does not compute.
Does not compute. What is love, Jim Kirk? And then steam comes out of its ears, and it doesn't even have ears.
You get Andy the android at Quark is like Nomad on steroids. Like, I want you. I need you.
That was almost like it's quoting song lyrics. I like that. He's trying to hump this. He's trying to hump this like this like drive.
It's like it looks like a water heater. Yeah.
It looks like a water heater. And they're like going, Andy, don't do that. That's not another robot. Okay. That's part of it's an important part of the ship. I want you. I need you. And I'm glad that robots will always talk like that. Even now, you watch something like Westworld on HBO, and they are still talking like. I think that'd be awesome if they had these great actors, and like Ed Harris is in Westwood. He's like going, "Stop right there! I will shoot you down." Beep boop. Beep boop.
Did you watch that show?
I did. I watched the first 2 seasons, and then the 3rd season. Not because I didn't want to watch it. I think there was a big delay or something, and I just lost track. So I never saw the 3rd season.
Where
it goes into the world instead of being Westworld. So
it's not even the same show.
Yeah,
it's not even really the same story anymore.
It had what's his name who played Jesse on Breaking Bad? Aaron Paul. And he's great. So I might revisit it just to see where they left off.
I got kind of turned off by because it's like, now it's like the Terminator or something, and it's not this clever psychological
thriller. That first
thriller.
season is still really powerful. Yeah. It's an example like the later Battlestar Galactica, where you take the basic concept of something that was popular but cheesy, and then they go, let's smarten it up. And it worked. I do love original Battlestar Galactica and still think that concept without what they did could be revisited, because
Definitely.
I think it's still a great, I mean, that show is, it's kind of garbage, but at the same time, the concepts are all really good. And I love the designs of everything.
Designs are
The
so
ships,
great.
the helmets, the Cylons, all of it. So I would do that. I did enjoy the reboot because the reboot was really smart. It went on too long. And I think they didn't quite know where they were headed, just like Lost, where they're like, okay, this is how it ends.
Yeah.
But for a reboot where they said, let's just do the smarter version, yeah, those are 2 successes. We go off on tangents, man. We were talking about something totally different. We were talking about war movies. And actually, I'd be interested, just, post that. Ask our viewers, their takes on some of these war films or like the nuclear panic stuff. If they also have things they'd like to chime in on. Because we know a lot of stuff, but we always get people saying like, well, did you see this? And I do want to see Come and See, because that's been getting a lot of great, reviews.
I was trying to look this up, and I can't, I think I got the name wrong, so I can't remember. It's an Italian director. He's like sort of like the Italian Woody Allen.
Wow.
You would know him, but he did a war film back in the early or late 80s, early 90s, where he plays a guy who protects his son. That he's in a
you mean Life is Beautiful?
Yes.
Roberto
What's the guy's name?
Benigni. Is it
Roberto
Benigni?
Benigni? Okay.
Roberto Benigni. Sorry.
I was looking up Richard Bernini and I couldn't find it. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
That wasn't that kind of a controversial movie because it's portrayed almost. It's a tragic comedy, I guess.
It is a tragic comedy.
Some people have issues with, I think, portraying the Holocaust in that light.
Also, some people find what's really interesting to me. Oh man, sorry, you just opened a can of rabbit hole. Because Life is Beautiful was a surprise hit. It was well made, but a lot of people find him. And more than Woody Allen, he was definitely, here come the cops again. I don't know if you can hear them. Yeah. It makes it sound like I'm living in Skid Row. So they go like, Chad, I got to wrap this up. I got to get these cans to the store. Anyway, the whole thing is he's basically like Italy's Jerry Lewis. So a lot of people find his clownish stuff, because he also writes and directs his own stuff, which is very Jerry Lewis as well. He's a little over the top and people find him a little like much. You remember when he won the Oscar, the whole thing about him climbing over the chairs and then hugging people and going, I love you. I make love to all of you. And you're like, okay, buddy. Okay. I mean, I find him amusing and I've liked things he's been in, and Life is Beautiful is probably his best thing ever. It's heartfelt, but yes, putting a comedy in a concentration camp, even though he's not skirting the darkness, the whole point is he's trying to make it seem to his kid who's in the same camp that this is all a fun game. But what really and I don't think they interviewed him with this specific question, did you just steal this from Jerry Lewis? Because Jerry Lewis's famous unreleased film, The Day the Clown Cried, is the same thing, essentially, except for it's not a family man. The whole thing is Jerry Lewis got a hold of a script, which was about a clown, an actual circus clown in wartime Germany. And I believe he's Jewish, perhaps. I can't remember if he's supposed to be or not. But the whole thing is he tries to make life bearable in the camps for the kids he uses like bird shit to make like the white mouth. He's using like charcoal to make the clown makeup, and then he performs skits and the kids are all, they're laughing. And then the camp guards basically at the end of the movie are like, your last job is to take them to the showers. And so it's him leading the kids into the showers like, yeah, let's play a game. And he's crying the whole time, goes in, and he dies with the kids. Boy, what a laugh riot. Now, the script wasn't supposed to have Jerry Lewis-y pathos moments or Jerry Lewis wacky bits. So I remember reading an article where the original screenwriters like, we were very hesitant that Jerry Lewis was going to make the movie. And they said, and then he changed some stuff. He made it schmaltzier, which actually makes that not work. Because if he's doing all the Jerry Lewis, I'm just a little kid kind of stuff, it's like, no, don't do that. And he worked in like, I tripped, I fell over. Oh, Mr. Nazi God, please forgive me, tripped over your shoe. Oh, but he still wants to have that emotional punch at the end. Plus the fact that man, when he was making the movie, had very little money to make it and was at the height of his Percocet addiction, which he did admit later. He's like going, I'm proud of what I made, but I was not in my right mind while I was making it. And he never released it, and only some people would get to watch what he had assembled. Like he would take it out of the vault and show it to some people.
Didn't Jerry Seinfeld get to see it?
No, not Jerry Seinfeld. It was Harry Shearer. Harry Shearer. There was an article in Spy magazine back in the 80s, which was one of my favorite satirical mags. And they did an entire article on The Day the Clown Cried, where they're like, this is the movie you're never going to see. But they interviewed every living person they could find who had seen it, that Jerry had shown it to. Harry Shearer was one of them. And they did like an oral history where you would just cut from one person to another person describing what they witnessed. And Harry Shearer's quote is something like, it is something so horrible that it's beautiful. He basically said, it is the worst thing you've ever seen, which makes it the best thing I've ever seen. Like he was like, he was honored to watch it. And when it's over, it's like Jerry Lewis would turn and like go, what'd you think? And then it's like, masterpiece, Jerry, masterpiece. And I think 9 minutes of it was released after his death, or a chunk of it on YouTube with his estate's approval. So you can find footage, entire scenes, but still the full movie that will probably never be released.
When was it that he made this?
Like 69 or 71 or I mean, it's before he tried to go back to doing, he got off the drugs ish and did like Hardly Working, like those terrible 80s movies he did, like Hardly Working, or what was the other one? He made a couple that were like, I'm old, but I'm still trying to do the thing. Ah! And you're like, oh, this is not working. With disco music in the background. And he's like, I'm at a titty bob. And you're like, don't. And by the way, I do have Jerry on the brain because on Pluto TV, sometimes that's a streaming service that's just live channels. Like they have an entire channel that's Mystery Science Theater 3000, and it just runs 24 hours. Like you can just stop in. So I'll have it in the background, and I had it on their comedy movie channel. And I just happened to, it was a day where they were just showing Jerry Lewis movies. And I'm like, great. Because I didn't even need to look up at the screen. I've seen these so many times. I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm done. I'm writing. I'm like, I'm laughing without even seeing it. But they, The Ladies' Man and Cinderfella, I watched those back to back. And I was like, going, man, classic Jerry kills me still to this day. Some people hate him. I love him.
Is Cinderfella? What's the one where they have that amazing set where it's in a
that's the Ladies' Man. That's the Ladies' Man, and that was also the one where he invented essentially video playback. He's the guy that invented that, since he was directing it, but also he's in every scene. He had attached to the film camera, he had an instant playback, like cheap video thing, so he could do a take, run, watch it, and then go back. That now, of course, every director is constantly referring to that stuff, and it's all digital now. But literally, Jerry Lewis he was kind of an innovator, and that set was an entire soundstage. It's insane.
Yeah.
Cutaway
That was one of
building. All these rooms.
That was back when we in the early 90s when we still live in Houston. That was one of we had this ongoing sort of film.
Yes.
It was like the Brendan curated film festival, and it's like you have to watch this movie. So it was Marx Brothers, it was Ladies Man,
yes,
the Star Trek Next Generation. You were taking me on a tour through like the first couple seasons.
Yes.
So
because I love my friends and I need to share. But that it's still. I know it backwards and forwards, and there's still bits that are so well conceived. There's some that are weird and don't work, but he's always trying something. And it's, again, the timing. And you can tell the bits where he improvs, where something has gone wrong and leaves it in because he was really good at it. The whole thing with this guy comes to date one of the ladies. It's an all-ladies boarding house. And he's the only guy there because he had his heart broken, but he'll work really hard as like their caretaker guy. So they all have a like, oh, Herbie, you're the best. I don't like ladies. Like the whole thing was like his heart was broken. So he's like, I don't want to be around the ladies because I'm mine. But so this guy comes to date one of the women and so he's like, go tell blah 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 them here. And he's obviously like a tough guy, a gangster. And he sets his hat down on the couch, and Herbert, who's Jerry Lewis's character, sits on it. And he goes, that was my new hat. And he goes, oh, it's not so bad. And he's like trying to make it better. It's crushed. He's like, put it on my head. Put it on my head. And the whole thing is that guy is simmering. Like he is about to destroy, and he doesn't look at him. He's looking straight ahead. He's like, yeah. He goes, that's not what it looked like. Fix the brim. And it's just, I think all I do, if I bend it like that looks good. It looks like it did, but it doesn't look like it did before. It doesn't look like it. And then the whole thing is everything he's doing to fix the hat is breaking the hat and making it worse. And the guy's just like going, he starts to almost cry by the end. He's like going, yeah, you've ruined my hat. My head is ruined. He's like, I think should I go away? Should I leave you now?
And that had to be like the premise was set, but that had to be all improv, right? Between the two actors basically doing
improv
routine.
Obviously, it was like this unfolded. This is the gimmick, and we'll see where it goes. Right. And in the trivia, they do say, and I picked up on it too. There are parts where he purposefully blocks you from like you can't see his face. He goes in front of the guy to work on it. You can hear him cracking up slightly. Yes, because he's losing it. Jerry Lewis, of course, because the guy he's playing against is a guy he had in a lot of his movies, including The Nutty Professor. Because, like, if you want like a really tough guy that Jerry Lewis can just tromp all over, you had this dude. So yeah, he's like going, the brim is almost if I tilt, and he's like going, that's not working. That is not working. And you're literally going, sorry, I know that we went down that
stuff. Yeah.
I do too. And I like chaotic comedy when it's done well. And him and the Marx Brothers are great examples of chaotic comedy. Groucho just happens to also be one of the smartest verbal comedians. And that's what makes the Marx Brothers amazing. They have 3 different personalities, and they have bits that fit each one of them. And Groucho on his own, improvisationally, but also really talented writers who wrote the perfect... Groucho lines will live forever. They are unbelievable. Like, I mean, every day almost, I think of the line, it's like, I never forget a face, but in your case, I'll make an exception. Yeah.
I have so many fun memories of Animal Crackers because that was one that you introduced me to.
Animal Crackers being their second one, and one of my favorite scenes is where they left this whole mistake in because Groucho ran with it, and it's where he's talking to one of the non-funny people. I mean, he's a character actor guy, but the character actor messes up and calls Groucho by his own character's name. And then Groucho goes, wait a minute, I'm Captain Spaulding, you're blah, blah, blah. And he's like going, yes, I'm sorry. He's doing the Italian accent. He goes, He goes, isn't that right? You're Garibaldi, I'm Captain Spaulding. And then he just stands up and he walks up and looks down as if he's looking down like from a stage. He's like going, does anyone have a program I can borrow? I'm just like, that brain, the comedy brain. Oh, that man was a god. Okay.
Yeah. And this is not just making me think of this because I was working on the ELECTRA Woman video for most of the past week. There's a couple of moments in the clips that I use that make me think of this spontaneous stuff because first of all, there's one scene where it's from the episode with Spider Lady that I used this scene where Spider Lady has made herself look like a duplicate of ELECTRA Woman and DYNA Girl she knows something's off, but she hasn't figured it out yet. And then all of a sudden the real ELECTRA Woman comes to the door. And the scene where Deidre Hall is coming in at the door as the real ELECTRA Woman, you can see as she's walking in and you see her go like pull her face down for a second. Like something's about to make her laugh, but she recovers. Just little touches like that. And then there's a great moment where that I use where you do Glitter Rock's cackle. And then I cut to him actually doing the laugh, which is again musically almost exactly the same as what you had just done.
I'm so sad that I have a memory for this crap.
And he's doing it as he's running to the door. He's supposed to turn to the camera and say, "Courtesy of Glitter Rock." But he goes, "Ha ha ha." And he turns his head first and he goes, because he lost track of where the camera was.
He didn't know where the camera was.
He can't see through his glasses.
And here's another thing. That also is a testimony to literally those shows were not only cheap, I doubt they did 2 takes of anything.
Right.
I mean, they cranked them out and they're like, the kids are not going to notice or care, So there are little mistakes all through there. Watching the same video, there's the bit where Sideman is talking to Glitter Rock, and it was one of the clips he used, and he goes, so your guitar thing can do
yeah.
And you can hear him kind of like going, wait, what is it? So your guitar thing, it makes people do whatever you want.
That stuff you do.
And they're like, that worked. Moving on. Moving on.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's wrap it up because I'm about to faint.
Yeah, me too. Cool. Well, this will wrap us. Our listeners won't have any idea, but we won't see each other for at least 2 weeks.
Oh, pal. Have a good tour.
Thank you.
Rock people's asses off. And yeah, you'll have to bleep that. I don't even care. Rock people's asses off.
I shall.
Okay. Just make sure that when you guys leave that state, there are people that are not able to sit down anymore.
Oh, yeah.
People, the back of their pants goes like this.
A moment of silence.
Whoa. A moment of silence for all those soon-to-be missing asses.
That's another title consideration. Soon-to-be missing asses.
Yeah, soon-to-be missing asses.
A can of rabbit hole or that one, I think, is the 2 ones.
What a can of rabbit hole. You know what I'm saying? No? Where am I? Have you seen my nurse? Anyway, have fun. I'll miss you. I'll watch plenty of movies we can talk about when you get back.
Oh, yeah. We should have tons to catch up on by the time I return.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe, all that stuff, and join us on Patreon. You'll get to see all this stuff way sooner than anybody else. If you join us on Patreon. He might not even bleep
some of the words I use on the Patreon. Nice.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Like, don't.